Here's some good news for everybody. New York City crime hits historic low, defying dire predictions about end of stop and frisk. The falling crime rate has led some defenders of the controversial policy to admit they were wrong. So that's good. That's great news, actually. So I want to give you guys some more information. There were a total of 290 killings across New York in 2017. That's from preliminary New York City Police Department figures. That's down from 335 homicides in 2016, and it was at a peak of 2,245 in 1990. So it's come a long way down. But what happened was Bill de Blasio came in, got rid of stop and frisk, and people thought, well, now you're going to have a giant crime explosion. Actually, no, it decreased. They got rid of stop and frisk, and there was a decrease in crime. Totally disproves the people who wanted to keep stop and frisk. And they're even saying, people are admitting it. People were like, yeah, I was for stop and frisk. I was wrong. So, wow, that's refreshing that we learned something that's a fact, and people are actually admitting, yeah, you know what, we were wrong. Because usually in our politics, people don't admit when they're wrong. I mean, how many times has climate change been proven over and over, but people on the right are like, no, that's wrong. I don't care. I don't agree. So it doesn't matter if you don't agree. Well, I still don't agree. So we already knew stop and frisk was a failure, and it's unconstitutional. So I want to show you this from The Guardian. Only 3% of 2.4 million stops result in conviction, report finds. That report by New York Attorney General is the first detailed examination of policy deemed unconstitutional earlier this year. Actually, this article is from 2014, just so everybody knows. But it showed that only 3% of 2.4 million stops resulted in a conviction. So that is a failure rate of 97%. So, to reasonable people, they looked at this and they went, oh, so when you get rid of stop and frisk, you're not going to see a spike in crime because stop and frisk failed 97% of the time. But of course, people ignored that piece of the evidence, and it took actually getting rid of it and a decrease in crime, leading to some people going, okay, you know what? You were right. Stop and frisk didn't work. But by the way, apart from not working, because that's one conversation to have, it's also unconstitutional, I would argue, because you have a Fourth Amendment protection from unreasonable search and seizure. And what stop and frisk is people would just stop you and frisk you. Literally, it's in the fucking title. It's, oh, okay, here, stop. We think you look suspicious. Why? It has nothing to do with your race or anything like that. And then they would pat them down, and then they make their decisions accordingly. But that seems to me to be an unreasonable search. If I'm walking down the street, what are they gonna? And a cop tries to frisk me. I'm like, what the? I didn't fucking do anything. You don't have any right to do this. I would argue that's an unreasonable search and seizure. And by the way, let's be clear. This, of course, was overwhelmingly used against minority populations and poor people. It was not used against Wall Street. Meanwhile, if you frisk the assholes on Wall Street, you'll almost definitely find a decent amount of cocaine. Those guys have been coked to the gills since the 1980s. So, it's funny. Hey, you're not frisking the people with money and power, even though you're going to get a decent amount of cocaine on those people, which you could arrest them for, right? Or even though I don't want you to arrest anybody for drugs, but you could do that, but you don't do that because you're choosing not to do that. You go after the people with no money and no power. But thankfully, with the elimination of stop and frisk, the truth prevailed, and the crime rate actually went down. But by the way, you know who has not changed their tone on this? Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump. Trump said we need nationwide stop and frisk. Oh, God. So we need a program nationwide that's unconstitutional, takes away your Fourth Amendment rights, and has a 97% failure rate. No, we don't need that. And again, to boot, it doesn't even work.